The storm had been building all evening, dark clouds rolling in from the Atlantic like an invasion force. Marcus Whitmore stood on the weathered deck of his family's coastal estate, watching the waves grow violent against the rocky shore below. He'd inherited this place 6 months ago when his grandmother passed, along with a collection of strange journals and a letter that made absolutely no sense. When the time comes, one of our blood must answer the call from the deep. Do not run from her, Marcus. She has been waiting longer than you can imagine. His grandmother had always been eccentric, but this felt different. The letter had been sealed with actual wax and marked with a symbol he'd never seen before. A spiral within a circle, surrounded by what looked like waves or perhaps tentacles. Marcus took another sip of whiskey, letting the burn distract him from the unease crawling up his spine. He was a marine biologist, a man of science. He'd spent the last decade studying migration patterns and ocean ecosystems. He didn't believe in family curses or mysterious calls from the deep. Thunder cracked overhead, and the wind picked up, carrying spray from the waves that crashed 70 feet below. He should go inside. The storm was getting dangerous, and standing out here was idiotic. But something kept him rooted to the spot, his eyes fixed on the churning water. That's when he saw her dot at first. He thought it was debris, a piece of driftwood, or maybe a dolphin caught in the rough current. But then the shape rose higher, and he realized it was a person, a woman, swimming through waves that should have torn her apart, moving with an impossible grace toward the private beach at the base of the cliff. Marcus didn't remember running, didn't remember the treacherous stone steps carved into the cliff face, or the rain that started pouring as he descended. His scientific mind screamed that this was impossible, that no one could survive in those waters. But his feet carried him down anyway. He reached the beach just as she emerged from the surf. She was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, and the sight of her drove every rational thought from his mind. Her skin held a faint luminescence in the darkness, like moonlight on water. Her hair cascaded down her back in waves that seemed to move independently of the wind. Dark as midnight, but shot through with streaks of silver and deep blue. She wore something that might have been a dress or might have been the ocean itself, clinging to her form and shifting like liquid. But it was her eyes that captured him, deep green, the color of the sea on a stormy day, and ancient beyond measure. "Marcus Whitmore," she said, and her voice carried over the storm like music. "I have been waiting for you." He stood frozen, water soaking through his clothes, rain streaming down his face. "How do you know my name?" She smiled, and it was sad and hopeful all at once. "I know everything about your bloodline. Your name, your face, the mark you carry on your left shoulder blade, a birthmark shaped like a wave." Marcus's hand instinctively moved toward his shoulder. No one knew about that mark. He kept it hidden, had been self-conscious about it since childhood. "Who are you?" he managed. "My name is Narita." She took a step closer, and he could see that her feet barely left impressions in the wet sand. "I am the keeper of the covenant, the guardian of the promise made by your ancestor 100 years ago." My ancestor. Marcus felt like he was in a dream. "This is insane. You're hypothermic. We need to get you inside, get you warm." "I do not feel cold as you do," Narita interrupted gently. "And this is not insanity, though I understand why you would think so. Your world and mine have been separate for so long that you have forgotten we exist. But forgetting does not break a bond sealed in blood and salt." The wind howled around them, but Marcus noticed that no rain seemed to touch her. The drops simply slid away, as if she were coated in something invisible. "What bond? What are you talking about?" Narita's expression grew serious. "In 1825, your great-great-great-grandfather, Captain Edmund Whitmore, was caught in a storm much like this one. His ship was breaking apart, his crew drowning. My people saved them, pulled them from the wreckage and brought them to shore. But such salvation requires payment." "Payment," Marcus repeated, his scientific mind trying to find purchase on something logical. "What kind of payment?" "A promise," she said softly, "that when we called, one of his bloodline would answer, that they would come to know us, to understand the world beneath the waves, and to choose whether to bridge the gap between land and sea. Every 50 years, we call. Every 50 years, your family has sent someone. And now it is your turn." Marcus shook his head, backing away slightly. "This is crazy." My grandmother was sick at the end. These stories she filled my head with were true, Narita finished. She knew I would come. She prepared you as best she could, though she could not tell you everything. Some truths must be experienced to be believed. She reached out her hand, and Marcus saw that her fingers were delicate, but somehow wrong to elegant. The nails more like polished shells, something webbed and translucent between them that hadn't been visible before. I'm not asking you to believe everything tonight, Narita said. I'm only asking you not to run. Give me time to show you the truth. Let me explain what your ancestor promised and what it means for both our peoples. And if I refuse? Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure why he was even entertaining this conversation. Sadness flickered across her face. Then the covenant weakens further. The barrier between our worlds grows thicker. And the next time we call, if there's a next time, it may be too late. The balance is delicate, Marcus Whitmore. Your bloodline holds one key to maintaining it. Thunder boomed overhead, and a wave crashed so close that foam washed over Marcus's feet. The cold finally penetrated his shock, and he shivered. Narita noticed. You need to get out of this storm. Will you grant me shelter? One night to begin explaining. That's all I ask. Marcus knew he should say no. Should call the Coast Guard, or the police, or someone. This woman, if she was even human, had just swum through a deadly storm and was spouting impossible stories about ancestral covenants and worlds beneath the waves, but his grandmother's letter burned in his memory. And despite everything, despite every rational cell in his body screaming that this was madness, he found himself nodding. One night, he said, you can explain, and then we'll see. Narita's smile was radiant. Thank you. You don't know what this means. As they climbed the cliff stairs together, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed irrevocably. The storm raged around them, but Narita moved through it like she belonged to it, like the wind and rain were welcoming an old friend home. When they reached the house, Marcus led her inside. Dripping water across the hardwood floors his grandmother had lovingly maintained. In the light, Narita looked more human, though that strange luminescence still clung to her skin. I'll get you a towel, Marcus said, falling back on normal hospitality because he had no idea what else to do. That won't be necessary, Narita replied, and before his eyes, the water simply fell away from her, pooling at her feet before flowing back toward the door like it had a mind of its own. Within seconds, she was completely dry. Marcus stared. Okay, that's new, Narita laughed, and the sound was like waves on sand. There's so much I need to show you, Marcus Whitmore. So much you need to understand. But first, I think you need something stronger than that whiskey you were drinking on the deck. You could see me. I have been watching for your presence for 3 months, she admitted, waiting for the right moment. The storm, the alignment of the moon and tide tonight was the night I could finally cross over and speak with you directly. Marcus walked to his grandmother's old cabinet and pulled out a bottle of rum that had to be at least 40 years old. He poured himself a generous glass. Start talking, he said. Tell me everything. And Narita, it better be the truth, because I'm about 2 seconds from convincing myself I'm having a breakdown. She settled into a chair that had been his grandmother's favorite, and in that moment, Marcus could almost see the old woman smiling, as if she'd known this exact scene would play out. The truth, Narita said, is far stranger and more beautiful than you can imagine. But if you'll listen, if you'll keep your heart and mind open, I promise you this, by the time the sun rises, you will understand why I have waited 2 centuries for this moment, why I have dreamed of meeting you, Marcus Whitmore, and why your choice in the coming days will determine the fate of more than just 2 people. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, in the warm light of the old estate, Marcus sat down to hear a story that would change everything he thought he knew about the world. The morning sun broke through dissipating clouds, casting golden light across the water. Marcus had barely slept. He'd spent most of the night listening to Narita speak of underwater cities, of a civilization that existed in the deep trenches where human technology couldn't reach, of a people who had watched humanity evolve from primitive coastal dwellers to masters of the surface world. She'd shown him things, small things, made water dance in the air without touching it, hummed a melody that made the windows frost over with crystalline patterns that looked like coral, pressed her palm to his chest, and let him feel the rhythm of the ocean itself, as if his heart was briefly sensing with something vast and ancient. By dawn, he was either going insane or everything he'd believed about the world was wrong. He wasn't sure which option terrified him more. "There's someone you need to meet," Narita said as the first rays of sunlight touched her face. In the daylight, she looked more solid, more real, though that otherworldly quality never quite left her. "Someone who can confirm what I've told you. Someone from your world who knows the truth." "Who?" Marcus asked, exhausted and wired on too much coffee. "The keeper of the old lighthouse." "Thomas Brennan." Marcus frowned. "The lighthouse hasn't been operational in 15 years. I thought it was abandoned." "It is abandoned by your Coast Guard," Narita said softly. "But Thomas never left. He has his own reasons for staying, his own connection to my people, an hour later." Marcus found himself driving his Jeep down a nearly overgrown coastal road, Narita sitting beside him. She seemed fascinated by the vehicle, running her fingers along the dashboard like she was learning its secrets through touch. The lighthouse emerged from the morning mist like a ghost, a tall white tower streaked with rust and salt, surrounded by a keeper's cottage that had seen much better days. But smoke rose from the chimney, and as Marcus parked, he saw curtains move in one of the windows. The door opened before they could knock. Thomas Brennan was tall and weathered, probably in his 70s, with a thick white beard and eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked at Narita, and something profound passed across his face: recognition, pain, longing, and resignation all at once. "So it's time again," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "Another 50 years gone." He stepped aside. "You'd better come in, both of you." The cottage interior was surprisingly well maintained, filled with nautical instruments, old books, and photographs. But what caught Marcus's attention was the portrait hanging above the fireplace, a painting of a woman who looked remarkably similar to Narita, though her coloring was different, her hair a shade of copper red that seemed to shimmer even in the painted form. "Her name was Serafini," Thomas said, following Marcus's gaze. "And before you ask, yes, she was like your Narita here, from beneath the waves, from a world that shouldn't exist but does." Marcus sank into a worn armchair. "You knew. All this time, you knew." Thomas laughed bitterly. "Son, I didn't just know. I lived it." He moved to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of something amber. "It's early, but trust me, you'll want this." He poured 3 glasses, handed them out, then settled into his own chair with a groan. "It was 1975. I was 26 years old, stationed here as the lighthouse keeper. Young, stupid, and convinced I knew everything about the ocean. Then one night, during a storm much like the one last night, I found her on the beach." Narita leaned forward. "Serafini, my sister, your sister," Thomas repeated, and his eyes glistened. "God, she was magnificent, terrifying and beautiful and completely impossible. She told me the same things I imagine Narita's told you, about covenants and bloodlines and the balance between worlds. But my bloodline," Marcus said. "I thought only the Whitmores were bound by the covenant." "Yes," Thomas interrupted, "but the covenant isn't just about your family, son. It's bigger than that. Your ancestor saved dozens of men when his ship went down. Some of those men had families here. The web of connections spread through this whole coastline. The sea people, they mark bloodlines, watch them, wait for the right moments to reach out." He took a long drink. "Serafini came for a different reason than Narita has. She came to warn us. There was a company back then, wanted to build a deep-sea mining operation just off this coast. They would have torn through one of the sacred sites, destroyed something ancient and irreplaceable. She asked me to help stop it. And did you?" Marcus asked. "I tried." Thomas's face hardened. "I exposed their plans, got the environmental groups involved, made a lot of noise. Lost my job with the Coast Guard over it, actually. But we stopped them. Serafini and we worked together for months. And somewhere in all that," he trailed off, staring into his glass, "you fell in love." Narita said gently. "Deeper than the ocean itself," Thomas whispered. "She was everything I never knew I wanted. Smart as hell, funny, passionate about protecting her world. We talked about everything: philosophy, science, art. She taught me to see the ocean differently, not as something to be conquered or studied, but as something alive, aware, precious. Marcus felt a chill run through him. What happened? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. The same thing that always happens when land and sea try to mix: reality. She had responsibilities below, a role in her society that couldn't be abandoned. I had a life here, family, friends, and the physical differences. He shook his head. You don't understand yet, Marcus, but they're not human. Not exactly. Narita can pass for a few hours, maybe a few days, but maintaining that form takes effort. In her true state, well, you'd understand why sailors called them mermaids and were both attracted and terrified. I would have shown him eventually, Narita said, when he was ready. The point is, Thomas continued, we had 3 months together. 3 months where I thought maybe, just maybe, we could make it work. Then she told me the truth. He looked at Narita. You wanted to tell him, or should I? Narita met Marcus's eyes. The covenant your ancestor made wasn't just about showing up when called. It was about the possibility of binding, of someone from land and someone from sea joining together, creating a bridge between worlds. A child of both realms who could exist in either, who could help maintain the balance. Marcus felt his stomach drop. You're saying you came here expecting me to? No, Narita said quickly. I came here hoping you would understand first, see our world, know us. The choice to bind is always free, always. But yes, that is the ultimate purpose of the covenant. Every 50 years, we hope that this might be the generation where land and sea can join. Thomas stood abruptly and walked to the window. Serafini wanted that with me. God help me, I wanted it too. But there was a price I couldn't pay. What price? Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. To bind with one of them, to create that bridge, you have to undergo a change, Thomas said, his back still turned. Not complete, you don't become what they are. But you're not fully human anymore either. You can breathe underwater, dive to depths that would crush a normal person, live for centuries instead of decades. You become something between. He turned back, and Marcus saw tears on the old man's weathered cheeks. I was a coward. I had a mother who was sick, a younger brother who needed me. I told myself I couldn't abandon them. But the truth, I was scared. Scared of changing, scared of leaving behind everything I knew, scared of loving her as much as I did. So you refused, Marcus said softly. I refused. Thomas's voice broke, and Serafini went back to the deep. The covenant continued, but weakened. The bond that should have been forged remained incomplete. She sent word occasionally, through others of her kind who could reach the surface. She never blamed me, never stopped caring. But she never came back either. And I've spent 50 years in this lighthouse, watching the water, wondering if I made the right choice. He looked directly at Marcus. She died 10 years ago. Your Narita would have felt it, wouldn't you? Narita nodded. She died of heartbreak, Thomas. She never bound with another. She spent 50 years hoping you might change your mind. That one day you'd walk into the water and call for her. The old man's shoulders shook. God, I'm such a fool. Marcus felt like he was intruding on something private and profound. He stood awkwardly, unsure what to say or do. Why are you telling me this? He finally asked. To scare me? To warn me away? Thomas wiped his eyes roughly. To prepare you. Narita seems sweet, seems gentle, and I'm sure she is. But this isn't a fairy tale, son. This is about choosing between worlds, about becoming something other than what you are. And once you make that choice, there's no going back. He walked over and gripped Marcus's shoulder. You need to see what you're getting into. The whole truth, not just the beautiful parts. Narita, you need to show him. Take him down. Let him see your world, your true form, everything. He's not ready, Narita protested. He'll never be ready, Thomas said. I wasn't ready, but I should have gone anyway, should have seen it all before I made my choice. Don't let him make the same mistake I did, deciding based on fear of the unknown, rather than knowledge of what's real. Narita stood and approached Marcus. He's right. I've been easing you into this, trying to make it less overwhelming. But the blood moon rises in 5 days. You need to make your choice by then whether to even explore the possibility of binding, let alone commit to it. You deserve to know everything first. The blood moon, M. Marcus spent the afternoon in a daze, going through the motions of normal life while his mind churned with impossible thoughts. He tried to work, pulling up data on his laptop about coral reef degradation, but the words blurred together. How could he focus on ordinary marine biology when a woman from an underwater civilization was sitting in his grandmother's parlor, reading books about human mythology with an amused smile on her face? Around 3 o'clock, his phone rang. The number made his stomach clench. Victoria. He'd been avoiding her calls for weeks, ever since the funeral. His ex-fiancée had a way of appearing at the worst possible moments, and this qualified as perhaps the worst moment in his entire life. Marcus, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. Victoria. This really isn't a good time. I'm 10 minutes away. His heart sank. What? Why are you? Your mother called me. She's worried about you. Holed up in that creepy old house all alone. She asked me to check on you. Victoria's voice carried that particular tone of determination he knew all too well. We need to talk anyway. About us. There's no us, Marcus said, more sharply than he intended. We ended things 6 months ago. You ended things, Victoria corrected. I never agreed to it. Look, I'm pulling up the drive now. We'll discuss it inside. The line went dead. Marcus turned to find Narita standing in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. Someone from your past, she observed. My ex-fiancée, Marcus admitted. She's persistent, and you loved her. I thought I did. He ran a hand through his hair. It's complicated. Love often is. Narita moved gracefully to the window, peering out at the approaching BMW. I should make myself scarce. This conversation should be private. No, Marcus said, surprising himself. Stay, I don't want to hide anything. Not anymore. Narita's eyebrows rose, but she nodded. Victoria Chase burst through the door moments later, all business casual elegance and barely contained energy. She was beautiful in a polished, controlled way, blonde hair in a perfect bob, designer clothes that probably cost more than Marcus's Jeep, heels that clicked authoritatively on the hardwood. She was already talking before she fully entered. Marcus, you can't just ignore your mother's calls. She's beside herself with worry. She stopped dead, seeing Narita. Oh, I didn't realize you had company. Victoria, this is Narita. Narita, Victoria. Victoria's trained smile appeared, the one she used for clients at her law firm. How lovely. I'm sorry to interrupt. Marcus and I have some private matters to discuss, so if you could give us a moment. Actually, Marcus said, anything you need to say can be said in front of Narita. Victoria's smile tightened. It's about our relationship, Marcus. I hardly think we don't have a relationship, he said firmly. We broke up half a year ago. Because you were grieving, Victoria said, moving closer to him, her voice softening into the gentle tone she used when she wanted something. Because you were confused and hurting after your grandmother's death. But I understood. I gave you space. Now it's time to move forward. Together, Marcus felt Narita's eyes on him, watching, learning. He'd told her last night about his life, but he'd glossed over Victoria, made it sound simpler than it was. We wanted different things, Marcus said carefully. We've always wanted different things. That's not true. Victoria reached for his hand, but he stepped back. Her expression flickered with hurt before hardening. We wanted the same things. A good life, financial security, a partnership that makes sense. I supported your career. You tolerated it. Marcus interrupted. There's a difference. You wanted me to take that position at your father's investment firm, analyzing marine assets for profitability. You wanted me to stop doing field research, to move to the city, to become someone I'm not. I wanted you to reach your potential, Victoria shot back, to stop wasting your degree on grant-funded projects that go nowhere. You're brilliant, Marcus, but you're throwing it away studying fish migration patterns when you could be making real money. Real impact. Impact for whom? Marcus asked. Your father's portfolio? Victoria's face flushed. That's not fair. I love you. I've always loved you. I was willing to wait while you got this place settled, while you worked through your grief. But now, she noticed the way his gaze drifted toward Narita. Now I see what's really going on. She turned to Narita, and her voice became cold, professional. I don't know who you are or what you want, but Marcus is vulnerable right now. He's grieving, isolated, and you're taking advantage. Stop, Marcus said sharply. This has nothing to do with Narita. You and I ended because we were never right for each other. I wanted a life connected to the ocean, to research, to understanding. You wanted a life connected to profit margins and social climbing. Neither of us was wrong, we just wanted different lives. And what? Victoria gestured around the old house. This is the life you want. Rotting away in your dead grandmother's house. Talking to mysterious women who show up out of nowhere. She focused on Narita again, her lawyer instincts engaging. How exactly did you two meet? What's your connection to Marcus? Narita spoke for the first time, her voice calm as deep water. I knew his grandmother. She asked me to look after him. It wasn't exactly a lie, Marcus realized. His grandmother had known, had prepared him as best she could. Victoria laughed, sharp and bitter. Of course, another one of the old woman's strays. She was always collecting people, filling Marcus's head with stories and superstitions. She turned back to Marcus. Is that what this is about? You're so desperate to hold on to her memory that you're entertaining whatever fantasy she set up before she died. You didn't know her, Marcus said quietly. You never tried to, because she was trying to keep us apart. Victoria's composure cracked. Every time I visited, she'd tell you stories about your destiny, about how Whitmore's belonged to the sea. She poisoned you against any future that didn't involve you drowning in her obsessions. Or maybe, Marcus said slowly, feeling something crystallize inside him. She saw that you and I weren't right for each other, and she tried to help me see it too. Victoria stared at him, and for a moment, he saw a genuine hurt in her eyes beneath the anger. You're really choosing this? Some fantasy life in a crumbling estate with a woman you just met over what we built together. We didn't build anything, Marcus said, and the truth of it settled over him with unexpected relief. We had an idea of what we thought we should want, but we never had what matters. We never had understanding, Victoria. Not really. You wanted to change me into someone you could be proud of at cocktail parties, and I wanted you to love the parts of me that you couldn't monetize. Victoria's hands clenched. Fine, fine. But don't come crawling back in 6 months when this, she waved dismissively at Narita. Whatever this is, falls apart. Don't expect me to be waiting. I won't, Marcus said softly. I'm sorry, Victoria. I really am. You deserve someone who wants the life you want. That person just isn't me. For a long moment, Victoria stood there, trembling with emotion she was fighting to control. Then she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. She paused on the threshold, looking back one last time. Your mother was right to worry, she said. You're losing yourself, Marcus. And when you finally wake up and realize it, you'll have nothing left. The door slammed behind her. The BMW's engine roared to life, and gravel sprayed as she tore down the driveway. Marcus stood in the sudden silence, feeling drained and strangely free all at once. I'm sorry, Narita said finally. I didn't mean to cause trouble in your life. You didn't. Marcus moved to the window, watching Victoria's car disappear around the bend. That's been brewing for a long time. Since before my grandmother died, if I'm honest. Maybe since we got together. We were never really in love, we just fit into each other's plans. But it still hurts, Narita observed. The ending of something, even when it's right. Yeah, he turned to face her. She wasn't completely wrong, you know. I am losing myself. Or maybe finding myself. I'm not sure which. Narita moved closer, and in the afternoon light, he could see the subtle shimmer of her skin. The way her hair seemed to flow like seaweed in an invisible current. Would it help to know that I understand that feeling? I've been preparing for this moment my entire life to 100 years, and now that it's here, I'm terrified I'm not who I thought I was. What if I'm wrong about this? What if the Covenant is just an old story we tell ourselves to feel connected to the surface world? What if I've built my entire identity around a fantasy? Marcus hadn't expected that vulnerability. You're having doubts too. Constant ones, she admitted. I was 12 when I first learned I was chosen to be the next caller. 12 years old, in your terms, though I'd lived nearly 60 years by then. They taught me everything about your world, your languages, your customs. I studied human art and music and philosophy. I practiced holding this form for hours, then days, then weeks. Everything I am has been shaped toward this moment. She sat on the old sofa, looking suddenly very young despite her ancient eyes. But what if Thomas was right to refuse? What if asking someone to change, to become something between worlds, is too much? What if love isn't enough to bridge the gaps between us? Marcus sat beside her. Or what if it is? What if Thomas's mistake wasn't refusing, but refusing without really knowing what he was giving up? Which is why I need to show you tonight, Narita-sa.